framework control plane with Olama. In our current learning, we'll learn about Llamafile and then run it to integrate it with Otari. It will be a good experience. As you can see from our flow, most of these tick mark components we have already completed. The one which we now want to do is host a Llamafile based model and then connect the Otari framework to the Llamafile. Without further ado, let's start on this. So, what is Llamafile? If we think about local models, they give us sovereignty and data privacy to run large language models or small language models in our local environment without a dependency on a cloud and other services for a variety of reasons, which we will not go into in this particular session. But to my knowledge, and as per the prevalent practice, you'll find these three frameworks which are quite popular. One is localai.ai.io. So this is the interface. We'll not go into local AI today. And you'll have found also have olama.com, which is Olama service. But these two need an installation. They work kind of in a client server setup. So you need to install it. You then need to download a model so that the API is set up. So it's a bit of a wrapper around it. But how about Llamafile? So here are some references links, and this is also another product from Mozilla AI in terms of the practices and the focus towards making an open uh, framework around the whole agentic uh, thinking. You can think or the ecosystem. So you can see through the GitHub and you can see some installation stuff which we'll do locally. And I shared another link which also goes to the Mozilla page where it also shares many documentation, and much of this documentation is very readable and very user and developer friendly to read and install. The other one which we want to see is the Mozilla.ai, and particularly because I want you to see when you go to this page, you'll see a lot of magic happening here. Like if you go to the open tools, you'll see a list of you know frameworks, tools which Mozilla is building. I'm super excited about it. And at the same time, I feel a bit sad that I'm not able to try all of this together right now. But we'll focus on one here, which is Llamafile. Uh, and I wanted to expose this page so that you can visit through Llamafile and see, as they build and deploy open source more tools in the agentic ecosystem. So, in essence, in short, Llamafile lets you build a full large language model or a small language model into a single executable. So it combines the model weights, inference engine, and runtime into a single file. So you don't have to think about the other stuff here. You just download a single file and run it anywhere. It can be a Mac OS, Windows, or Linux. So, unlike the tools like Olama and Local AI, which require a separate installation, client server setup, Llamafile is a single model, runtime, and server in a single file. There are more details if you go into the documentation to understand what all it enables and how it is working. It's all open source, but today we will not go into those details. Here we are more focusing on to the practical aspects. So if you see, we will run some of these steps. The first is there are a lot of models which are available, and you can use this link to see which models you want to try it out. And all of them are Apache 2.0 license, with the exception of one. But based on the memory size of your device, you can download one of this and try it out quickly. For example, we'll try this 1.6 GB file based large language model Qwen 3.5 for a use case so that it's fast enough and we can try something out quickly. So we first need to download this from this location. You can download any one of those files there. I've already done this and make it an executable by giving it a chmod plus x. I've already done these two, so I'll just show you by running this command. Okay, so I already have a server running up, so that's why it failed here. So I'll just stop those and rerun it. So you can see as simple as it gets. And it also says that the server is up at this endpoint. It's also a OpenAI compatible request response specific API endpoint. So I'll just say something as usual, my default hello message. And I can see very quickly the message which I get from Llamafile. So it's very quick to install, very quick to download and just run it out, right? Now we got this point here. Okay, all looks good. Llama file we are able to download, and but there's a disconnected piece here, right? At this point, so we have yet to connect the Otari framework to Llama file. So with that, one other information which I've shared here is if you visit this page, so Llama file exposes this endpoint as an OpenAI compatible request response endpoint. So it's as simple as 8080/v1. So as we did with Olama, we will update this endpoint in the config file, which Otari expects to know. And also, since there is no default pricing configuration for this, we will also need to add a small configuration to the config.yaml so that Otari understands that there is a pricing configuration which we want to apply to the Llama file based models when they are used. Now, if you think about what we did also in the Olama particular deployment, we deployed Olama inside the Docker service because there are some additional configuration you might need to do if you want to connect Otari, which is deployed inside a container service, to your host where you have deployed the Llama file. So instead of this, what we will do is we will deploy the Llama file in a Docker service. In order to do that, pretty simple. Use a Debian based any Ubuntu or whatever image as the source. Open the 8080 port, expose it out. That's what Llama file by default exposes out. And mount the volume. We have the Quen at the root of the service where we are deploying, and we want to deploy it at the mount it at app source. And when the Docker service starts, a simple command is we want to give it a plus X sign, a plus X permission, and run app and the file here with server host. You might say where these additional options came from. These are by default enabled. So if you see this particular link, when you start Olama without any option like CLI chat, it runs both the server and chat in the same terminal. So it starts these two services for both for you. So you don't have to provide some additional explicit commands. But in order to be very specific here, because we cannot start a terminal or a interactive terminal inside a Docker container, which we don't want to do, this could be the right command for us, to limit the context size and also make it more ginger based, which is the parameter to make, to expose it as an API. But for now, this is how we do it. So with this setup, we will now see one part here, which is the Docker we observed there. But let's also observe what is there inside the Docker Compose once again. So you see here Olama, and we have exposed it, and we have some host and keep alive parameters here. Sorry, I think it's a Llama file. Let's search for Llama file. I have some uh, remainders from the previous one. So you see the Llama file here, and let's see where else are we using it. So if you see here, when the Otari service starts, we are also creating a Llama file API base so that it knows that it needs to connect to Llama file, which is the container service URL linked within the Docker networking. After this is done, let's also visit the config YAML to see where we need to change the endpoints. So first point that since we will be it will be using an OpenAI based endpoint, we can search for OpenAI. So here you see the API key is empty because we don't need an API key for Llama file, and the API base, as we understood previously, it is localhost colon 8080/v1. So this we have mentioned here. But if you know, if we stop here, we will get an error from Otari saying that the pricing model configuration has not been applied on this model, so you cannot use this model through Otari. To bypass it, what we need to do is we just need to set this Llama file configuration under this provider's config. So just add a Llama file parameter with the API base, and this API base points to a Llama file API base which we created as an environment in the Docker file, remember? So with this setup, we are at least good from a pricing perspective, but for pricing, we also need another detail as to the configuration, what kind of pricing we want to apply there. So very similarly, we just need to apply this. And you might ask, where did I get this model parameter, llama file colon default. So if you see here, I think I had uh, added a particular configuration. I'm not sure if I'm finding it here, but let me do one thing here. I will go, yeah. So if you see, let's do one thing. We'll go to mozilla.ai and we will search for Otari. But I don't see it here, just a minute. Mm, let's go back to the Mozilla site. This is where you get to the foundations. And then go to here. Where can I find Atari in the product list? And here I go here. Then from Atari, I go to the documentation. So I go to discover Atari, documentation, and I search for Llama file. So always go to Llama, search to the documentation. Here it says these are the different model formats, kind of providers which it supports by default at this moment. Let's search Llama file here. So we have Llama file here, and you see the config key. We added a config key. Remember Llama file, and this is the default model which we can use. So it's just called default because it doesn't care what model you're using. It knows that it has to go to the endpoint which you're exposing. So it doesn't know whether it's Quen or any other model. This is by config the default parameter which it uses. So llama file colon default, that's what we will be using in the model to actually make a inference call. So this is what I've mentioned it here. This is the llama file adapter and default of the model. And similarly, input price per million is 00. We are not focusing on the cost expect right now. We will focus it on a future session just to keep it simple. But this is the basic configuration in the Docker Compose plus the config.yaml, which is needed for Otari to connect to the Llama file service. So the next command simply is docker compose up hyphen t. We have the Llama file plus the Otari service up. With this, I've also added another documentation point here as to how do you make API requests, and that is also present in the documentation. So it's as simple as this: use an OpenAI endpoint as we did with Olama, but the base URL is 8080 here, and we don't need the API key. The model here will be, as we saw, would be llama file colon default because we are now using it through Otari, but here it is just asking us to how you would use llama file if you just deployed it in your guest service, right, in your host service. So let me show you the code here. So you see, we have the Otari API key and we have added uh, the llama file API base here, which is localhost colon 8080 to expose it out. Uh, so if you see now the base URL localhost 8000, which is the Otari base URL, and then we make pass the model to Otari, which is llama file default from the configuration, if you remember, and we are dumping out the response. So let's try this out. So now we will run main.py file, which we reviewed as the code. So now you can see we already are getting some response here. Uh, I had to change one particular parameter which I was showing previously, which was not actually working, which was in the Docker Compose. So here we don't need to take the environment variable. We just need to use the llama file because it will override that value and we won't be able to connect to the llama file service endpoint. So this will only change. Now one other parameter let's check is we want to see review what we are getting out of it. And if you see, this is the OpenAI response which we get, like the content. But one of the interesting things you can see here is it also shows the model and other things. The usage is also very similar to what we received in case of Olama, but the difference here is we get also the audio tokens and cache tokens because I think this is more relevant to Llama 5 for Whisper. It has another model and we'll check it in another session. But one interesting fact here is the cache token. So some of the tokens with cache, this is a very important thing, and we'll focus on some of the other steps in another session as to what this cache token means, where it is happening. But this is interesting, it was not happening in case of Olama in particular. And this timings parameters were never shown in case of Olama, but is shown for Llama file in terms of what has been the prediction per second. And these are very important in terms of the statistics metrics which we want to capture along with the cache tokens. So I hope we were able to achieve the connection from the large language model from Otari to the Llama 5. And you can also deploy any model from the list of models which we exposed previously. I hope you try this out. It's super fun. And some of these principles can be taken into any open source framework you're building within your organization on a larger scale. Thank you so much. I hope you have a nice